In today's video, we will be looking at a £1,000 gaming PC parts list that you can build right now and build your perfect system. What we're saying is we have £1,000 budget and we're looking to buy the 7 components that make up a PC. So that's a CPU, motherboard, RAM, storage, case, power supply, and of course the graphics card. So I feel this is the best sort of overall build for £1,000. Now, you could tweak this build. You could maybe go a little bit higher on the graphics card, maybe a little bit lower on the CPU, or maybe even a little bit of a cheaper motherboard, perhaps. If you wanted to maybe save a little bit of money, you could probably do this for about £900 as well, or you could maybe go up to, say, 1,200 if you really want to push the boat out and go for a really expensive graphics card. But I think overall this build is going to be a good build. So without further ado, let's crack on. So the CPU of choice will be the Intel 12400f. This CPU is 6 cores and 12 threads. It doesn't have any of those sort of like eco cores or anything out economy cores or anything like that. It just has 6 cores with 12 threads and is pretty much what I would call the gaming CPU of choice. So all the parts will be listed below in the description, and everything can be purchased from there if you would like to. I don't make anything from that. From CCL, this 12400F costs £167.14, which I feel is really good value because A, you get a boxed cooler with that, so you don't have to worry about a separate CPU cooler. And I also think that for a 6-core 12-thread CPU at around about £170, it offers a really good value. And pretty much any graphics card up to about a RTX 3070 would be fine. I think once you get to the 3070 Ti and then you go upwards, you probably then want to go up to the 12600K, or potentially something like a Ryzen 5800X or the new 5800X 3D or something. For £170, this is a good choice. So moving on to our motherboard, we have gone B660, MSI Pro B660M-A Wi-Fi, and it takes the DDR4. This motherboard is again from CCL online, and it's £130 roughly, which I think is a really good value. Again, you get the Wi-Fi. It's micro ATX, but I think most people are kind of okay with that. If you wanted to go a little bit more premium, you could get a Z690 motherboard, but I think that's kind of overkill for the 12400F. So I would just stick at B660 and just get a micro ATX, and we're going to choose a micro ATX case anyway here, so I think it's going to be perfectly fine. Again, not too much to be said about this motherboard. It takes DDR4, so budget-wise it's going to be suitable for our budget. It's just a solid motherboard, and I think MSI generally do good motherboards, either AMD motherboards or Intel motherboards, so it's going to be perfectly fine. Let's move on to RAM. So the RAM here, just very basic, just the Crucial Ballistics 16GB kit, a 2x8GB kit, clocked at 3200 megahertz, and that is £56.61. So I think really any DDR4 kit at 3200 megahertz, as long as it's 16 gigabytes, is perfectly fine here. You could cheap out here with the RAM, I think, personally. Intel isn't too fussy with RAM, it's more Ryzen which is fussy with RAM. So really any 3200 megahertz kit here will be perfectly fine. If you can save money, maybe go used, that'll be perfectly fine as well. So the main component in any gaming PC is of course the graphics card, and we are going to go with the RTX 3060 in this build. Now, some people might say, okay, why don't we go into the RTX 3070 or the 6700 XT, because potentially you could have enough money in the budget, but at the moment where graphics card prices are, this is about around £430, I think it was. Let me just check. Okay, this is about £440 for the MSI RTX 3060 Gaming X 12GB version. I do kind of feel that for a £1,000 gaming PC, around about £450 or so is about right to pay for your graphics card, because you want to put most of your budget towards your graphics card, obviously. We could potentially, if you want to save a little bit of money, maybe go down to £800 or so, or maybe even £900. You could go down to the RX 6600 or even the RTX 3050. but that is going to affect your gaming performance. So you will have to realise that trade-off if you're willing to go. You know, if you have a little bit more of a tighter budget, you will have to go a little bit lower in terms of the graphics cards, but I'm sure you know that already. So moving on to the storage here. Now the storage, I think, is probably the place where you could really save money here. You could really cheap out if you really wanted to. Obviously, I wouldn't go with a hard drive because those times are over. But I've just chosen a 1TB NVMe drive, which is just basically like a Crucial P2, which is just kind of your standard PCI Express Gen 3 drive. It's nothing special. It's just going to do the job and going to be perfectly fine. Now, like I said, if you want to go down to 512 gigabytes, perhaps, that could be a good option as well, just to save you a little bit of money, and then maybe upgrade to like a 2TB hard drive as well. So you've got the SSD with the hard drive, save you a bit of money because you could upgrade at a later date. So the SSD is about £70 or so, but again, I would say if you wanted to cheap out here, this is probably one of the areas where I would cheap out. I would say, like I said, the RAM and the storage is the two places where you could cheap out. Potentially even the case, but I wouldn't try and cheap out too much on the case because it's just going to affect your looks and it's going to be hard to build in and it's just not going to be worth it really. And the case that I've chosen is actually very good priced anyway, so I wouldn't worry about that. Now the PSU, this really isn't a place to cheap out really. I would buy the best PSU that you can afford really on your budget. I've gone with the Corsair TX 550M. Okay, it's only 550 watts, but our system's probably only going to take about 500 watts here. So although it doesn't give you a lot of headroom in terms of upgrade potential, so I think generally that it is kind of a good place to get a good PSU. Now this costs £60, but have seen a RM550 actually for about £50 on Amazon, so I probably would actually go with that as well. If you really are thinking about upgrading at a later date and maybe going for a little cheaper build and then upgrading once you've got a bit more money, then I certainly would think about getting a 600 watt, a 650 watt or even a 750 watt PSU. That's just going to give you a little bit extra breathing space for a bigger or a more powerful graphics card, should I say. And last but not least is the case. Now I've gone with the Techwear Forge M2. It costs about £50 on Amazon currently. This has two RGB fans in the front, and I think it has one black fan in the back, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But I'll put a picture up and you'll be able to see. I think overall £50, it's an M80X case, so it'll fit our M80X board perfectly fine. And I think overall this is just a good budget case, but also gives you plenty of flexibility in terms of adding more storage or potentially adding a longer graphics card because it's got good graphics card support. I think it's about 300mm support for graphics cards, so that's going to be most graphics cards. Overall it's just a really solid case, and it's kind of based on the more expensive Fractal Design cases like the Meshify C and what have you. So I think overall it's just a good budget case, and I really wouldn't go too much further than that. I would just get a budget case and that'd be done. Now overall the total build price was £972.70. So there is a little bit of play there. You could, you know, maybe bump up the storage maybe, or potentially if graphics card prices come down you could go to the RX 3060 Ti, which would probably be my recommendation if you had the extra budget. To maybe say 1100, you could maybe get the 3060 Ti. That would be a good upgrade from obviously the 3060. So as always guys, I'm interested to know, do you think that build's good? If you had £1,000 budget to build your next gaming PC, is that round about what you would go with, or would you go with something maybe a little bit different? Maybe you'd go RX 6600 and maybe boost up the CPU to a 12600K, or you might even go to the Ryzen route and maybe go to a Ryzen 5800X. That could also be an option. I just want to know, like, what would you do if it was your sort of build and your sort of money? How would you go? So as ever guys, if you could like this video, that would really help and support me. I'm really trying to build my channel over this year. You know, I'm really trying to have a big push. So as ever, if you could comment as well, that would really help as well. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye guys.